So one use of stacks is to determine if an expression has balanced parentheses. And you can think about how often a compiler would need to do this to check parentheses and to check matching brackets. Happens all the time, right? So that is a kind of a classic use for stacks. So I'm going to walk through a couple examples to show how the algorithm works. I'll walk through one example where it'll be balanced parentheses and then a couple where it'll be unbalanced parentheses. So here's our first example, and we're going to evaluate this expression to determine if it has balanced parentheses. You can see here that it does, right? We have an open and closed regular parentheses on the outside and an open and closed bracket on the inside. This algorithm would work the same whether we are using just parentheses or just brackets or a mix of both. So when we're processing this expression, we're basically going to ignore all the other characters. So I'm going to ignore the letters and the plus symbols because I'm just determining whether the expression has balanced parentheses. That's all I care about in this particular algorithm. So I'm going to walk through this, and the first thing, I'm just going to parse this one by one. So first I find an open parentheses, and the rule for when we find an open parentheses is we push it onto the stack. So this is my stack over here. This is the bottom of the stack. This is the top of the stack. So I have an open, I push it onto the stack. And then I keep parsing. I'm ignoring. Now I find another open. So I push it onto the stack. My stack now has two elements. This is the bottom element. This is the top. If I were to peek at the contents of my stack, this is the element that I'd see. So then I keep parsing. I ignore, and now I get to a closed parentheses. The rule for a closed parentheses is I pop an element off the stack. So I'm going to pop this element off my stack, and I'm going to look to see if they match. Are these the same type of parentheses? In this case, they are. They're both open and closed curly brackets. So if that's the case, I'm done with those, and I can just get rid of them. Then I keep parsing, and I get to another closed parentheses. So here again, the rule for a closed parentheses is to pop and compare with the closed parentheses you just reached and the element that you just popped and see if they match. In this case, they do match. So again, because they match, I can get rid of them. I'm done. And now I've reached the end of my expression. There is one last thing I have to do, though, to determine if this expression had balanced parentheses, and that's I have to look at my stack. When I look at my stack, if it's empty, that means that my parentheses were balanced, and in this case, it is. So this expression has balanced parentheses. So let's look at an example where it's unbalanced. So here you can see in this expression, we have an extra open parentheses, right? We have two open regular parentheses and only one closed regular parentheses, plus an open and closed curly bracket. So this expression does not have balanced parentheses, and let's see how we'd use a stack to determine that. So again, we're going to start parsing. We have an open parenthesis, so the rule is I push it on the stack. I ignore. I reach another open parenthesis, so I push it on the stack. Keep going, ignore, another open parentheses, push it on the stack. Keep going, ignore, keep going. Now I find a closed parentheses. Remember, my rule for a closed parentheses is I pop something off the stack. So I'm going to pop this off the stack, and I compare to see if they match. In this case, they do. They match, so I'm done with that set. Then I keep going, and my next character is another closed parentheses. So I again pop off the stack, and I compare these two parentheses. Are they the same type? Yep, these are open and closed curly brackets, so they match. So I'm done with that set. And now I've reached the end of my expression, but I have to do that last test where I look to see if my stack is empty. In this case, my stack is not empty. I still have an element on the stack. And if I still have an element left on the stack, that means that this is an unbalanced expression. And the reason it's unbalanced is because there's an extra open parenthesis. Okay, so that's my example for an extra open. And again, I'll determine that because I'll get all the way to the end of parsing with a bunch of matches, but then my stack's not empty. My third example I'm going to look at here, we have an extra closed parenthesis. So here you can see we have one open and two closed, and then an open and closed curly bracket. So here I'm going to parse. I find an open, push it on the stack, ignore, find another open, push it on the stack, ignore, I find a closed. So again, my rule for closed is pop it off the stack and see if they match. They do, so I'm done with that set. Keep going. I have a close. Again, my rule for a close is pop it off the stack, see if they match. They do, so I'm done with that set. Now I have one more close, so my rule for a close would normally be to pop it off the stack, but in this case the stack is empty. There's nothing to pop. So this expression is unbalanced. And this time it's unbalanced because of the reason of having an extra closed parenthesis. So if I pop off a closed and if I reach a closed and there's no open to pop to check for a match, then I'm done. It's unbalanced. So that wouldn't even matter if I had something else left here to parse, for example, wouldn't matter. Once I reach a close that doesn't have an open left on the stack to try to match it up with, I'm done. And the expression is unbalanced. Okay, my last example is going to be mismatched parentheses. So here you see we have an open regular parens, an open curly bracket, but then I try to close my regular parens before closing my curly bracket. So this is going to be unbalanced, but for the reason of the type is mismatching. Okay, so I use the same algorithm. Here I have an open, so I push it onto the stack. Ignore, ignore, ignore. I have another open. Push it onto the stack. Ignore, ignore, ignore. Now I reach a close. My rule for close is to pop off the stack. So I'm going to pop off the stack. But then the next thing I do is I compare. And when I compare these two parentheses, I see that they do not match up. So this closed parenthesis is not the pair to this open. There's a mismatch. And if that's the case, again, I'm done. I don't keep parsing the rest of the expression. Doesn't matter if there's anything else there. I'm just done. And the expression is unbalanced. And it's unbalanced in this instance because we have a mismatch. Okay, so those are your 4 different options you could have, balanced or unbalanced for 3 different reasons. And you can see now how you can use a stack to determine that, whether or not the parentheses are balanced in your expression.